Hi, welcome to Heart Change You Live. My name is Heather, and I'm here with David, and Jackie is joining us today.
Welcome.
Yeah.
Our goal at Heart Change You is to equip you to touch lives, and we want to do this through bringing just practical spiritual tools to everyday life. And today, we've chosen the topic of rock bottom. So a lot of times we talk about addiction, and because we're affiliated with the Omega Project, and that's where we work. But this morning, actually, during our women's class, we were talking about the different types of spiritual rock bottoms or dry periods that we all hit. So I thought we might explore that idea because it is big in the addiction world, the necessity to hit rock bottom in order to be willing to make a change. So I thought we could talk about our own personal experience with hitting rock bottom, and also how we can help equip others who are working with people who are going through addiction and suffering, because that's also a whole other piece, is watching somebody and wanting to know how to walk alongside as they go through that process.
Let me jump in. I've actually shared this a few times in the last week, but I have a few workaholic tendencies. You know, I maybe a little bit called a load bearer, you know, some of things like that. And what's interesting, as I look at that, it's like, okay, what does it take for God to get through to me? And what I've found in my history, a lot of times that actually ends up being sickness. And again, that's
Physical sickness.
a lot of people, that's like, you got to be kidding. But the word, for me, what's restorative is the word rest. And if you go to Hebrews chapter 3 and then on into Hebrews chapter 4, God talks about entering into his rest. So when my spirit is able to enter into the rest of God and drink in the rest of God, that's incredibly restorative for me. It's transformational. I drink in life. Once I drink in life, I'm able to give life. Well, especially someone in ministry, I don't have the red flags of, I'm egotistical, I'm chasing money, I'm et cetera. So it's like, I've got this person in need. I've got this person in need. I've got this person in need. Where do you draw the line?
Right.
Where do you stop? And so many times I end up going faster and faster and faster and faster and faster. And at some point, my spirit, and I think that's the right word, begins to be caught up in that busyness to where it literally, it's like oil and water. My spirit is so absorbed in that it literally can't receive the rest of God. And so until my body gets thrown into a physical stopping place for a few days, a lot of times I literally can't receive from God in a way to overcome the down period, the struggle period.
What, practically does that mean when you say enter into God's rest? What do you actually practically do? Because that is kind of it's different for each person, but what does that actually look like for you?
Are you talking practically to get into spiritual rest, or are you talking to get into physical rest?
Well, I'm assuming physical rest is you're bedridden. But I don't think we need a picture of that. But to if somebody's kind of new to this, what would it mean to actually enter into God's rest? How would you receive that?
Well, let me start with a word that works for most people, is anxiety. If I'm in anxiety, that anxiety, the spirit realm acts like a magnet, and magnets have polar ends. And so one end is attracting God, and one end is actually resisting God and pushing him away. So when I'm in anxiety, I'm actually pushing away the rest of God, and then I go more and more into performance, and I'm faster, and that ain't working. So somehow I've got to step outside of that performance and get into a place where, let's say I don't get sick, where I'm forcing myself into a Sabbath day. I'm forcing myself into some form of a shutdown. It seems like until my body goes there for a period of time, my spirit literally is almost incapable of making that flip to where I start attracting the rest of God.
Okay.
I don't know if that helps, but
yeah, absolutely. I also want to say, anybody who is watching on YouTube or on Facebook Live, please jump into the chat if you can relate to this, which I think we all can. Please give us your insights, your questions, your comments, that type of thing. And be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell so you can get notifications. We got off to a roaring start. So that's
a roaring start.
A roaring start.
Why is it really roaring?
Cool. Well, you just jumped right in, and that's awesome because you bring a different perspective. Like, coming from the world of being an addict and having worked in addiction as well, I see a lot of parallels to the experience that you're talking about. And I think any of us, whether it's addicted to our cell phones or work or exercise, whatever we might be addicted to, can relate to that feeling of being anxious when I'm trying to rest, And one of the things that I've shared with people for a lot of years as they're going into treatment, there's always this pushback, this resistance. What's going to happen? Who's going to take care of my kids? Who's going to take care of my pets? Who's going to, once you even get somebody motivated that they need help, then there's this resistance. How can I stop my life? And I think that anxiety is what contributes to relapse, actually. And we don't even realize it,
I pick up on the word escalation. And frankly, if you listen to even what I was talking about, once the anxiety comes, the push towards performance gets even greater, and so then the workaholic tendencies and all of that is just faster, and the treadmill gets going faster. And the faster I do that, the less likely I'm able to receive strength. If I'm not receiving strength, if I'm not receiving rest in the presence, then my judgment becomes jaded, and then I feel like I have to do all of that. In addiction, the word that I use that almost always works is escalation. What we almost always do when we're hitting difficult places is we escalate inside of where we are.
So for you, you escalate in that workaholicism.
Absolutely.
With addiction, and escalate in using.
Well, it really, addicts are all over the place. And we talk about heart change. I really don't talk about addiction per se a lot in the program. So if someone's an anger addict, I'll just put it that way, then they escalate in the anger zone in an attempt to use anger or power statements to try to get their way or to fix the situation. Some people are manipulation and control addicts. Some people are escape artists. So whatever your strongest tendency is, you tend to try to escalate that to the highest level. That really is what tends to take people to that higher level severity.
So to be able to get to a place of even being willing to try something different, to enter into rest, to practice a Sabbath, to go into a treatment program, to whatever, there has to be some breaking point. A lot of that's why I chose the title for our day today about rock bottom, because a lot of times we talk about hitting bottom, and that can look different for so many people. My experience has been that a lot of times when people are talking about what's it going to take for you to hit rock bottom, they're usually talking about some kind of circumstantial thing,
right?
Like, you're going to lose your house, you're going to lose your kids, you're going to lose the respect of your family, you're going to lose your health, you're going to lose your job, you're going to lose money, whatever. It's these external circumstances. But then we watch people who are stuck in this cycle, and I was certainly one of those, where people are looking at me going, what on earth is it going to take? It's cost you your marriage, custody of your children, relationships with your family. What is it going to take for you to be willing? And my experience has been that as long as I'm focusing on those external circumstances, my recovery is going to be dependent on those external circumstances as well, because there isn't a formula for it. But what I mean by that is I'll jump into performance once I get sober. So I'm going to get my life together. I'm going to, start doing right. I'm going to go to church. I'm going to I'm going to get a job and pay my bills on time and be compliant to what I think it looks like to be a functional human being. But it just flips me over into that level of anxiety, that level of performance, and then that horrible cycle starts all over again, because I never truly get to a place of rest, a place of stillness, a place of, to use another recovery word, serenity, where I'm just at peace no matter what my circumstances might be. And so, for people watching an addict from the outside, maybe even you, like, how many times are you going to have to get sick, Pastor, before you finally, right? I mean, or
Hey, watch it.
Right, well, any of us, right? How many times am I going to hear you say, I can't stand being this size, before you quit eating cheesecake in the middle of the night, lady? Like, whatever.
Yeah.
I have to hit some sort of breaking point in order to be willing to do that.
We have a comment. Go, Matthew.
Awesome.
All right. We've got a comment and a question off of Facebook from Sasha. She said that she tends to go until she just can't anymore, and that's when she rests. She wants to know, though, how do we recognize the need to connect with God and godly people before we kind of get to that place where we're just forced into it?
That's a great question. That was actually, I was going to ask that too. Is like, okay, well, how do you get out of the spiral before it takes you down? Like, and so that's a great question.
I actually talk about that in terms, I call it see it sooner. And if you go to the book of James, he talks about sin actually starts as this tiny seed in the heart. And then after it's a tiny seed in the heart, what I would say is the next step is there's something rattling around at the spirit level. And you have to start seeing what happens at the spirit level to catch it as soon as possible. But most people won't catch it there, so then it becomes a thought. And then after it becomes a thought, it becomes a word. And then the emotions become tied to it. And then I put it in play with people, and usually as a joke. And then after I put it in play as a joke, then I put it in play seriously. And then after I put it in play seriously, then I begin to act on it. And then after I begin to act on it, it becomes a habit pattern. And after it becomes a habit pattern, it becomes death to me. Now, that's the process of everything starts at that deepest internal heart piece, and it works its way out there. The best answer to her question is, A, see it sooner. And B, if you go to the Sermon on the Mount, where Jesus says, if you look at a woman lustfully, it's as if you had done the whole deed. That's a lot of the message of the Sermon on the Mount. If it's in there, you're going to get there sooner or later. Mm-hmm. So why don't you start owning it as if you had already gotten there? And that's really what and people almost never will do that. If you confront them too early, I learned this many, many years ago. If you confront them too early, what will they say? Well, that's not what I was thinking. Well, I wouldn't have done that. Well, that's not who I am. I mean, they've got all kinds of excuses there, so they don't see it sooner. Even if they see it, they sure don't own it. They'll reject the ownership, and they won't be able to project forward to where, if I continue on this path, I'm going to be sick. Mm-hmm. And I have learned that about my body. And so I occasionally, it's like, I've seen this movie before. How about if we stop here? May only be a day or two away, but let's stop here versus, the old me.
That's where I was going to jump in and say the most practical way is you can recognize this pattern in yourself eventually. And if you're looking for that, you can say, wait a minute, previously this happened. Oh, I'm already here. And that helps you be able to see it sooner. And so I'm glad you went there with that.
Well, the old me, take it one step farther. I not only have to be sick, I have to be, drugged behind the truck for 3 or 4 days. So then it's like, then it's really going to take me some time to recover at that point. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, it's like, I don't even have to, I have to do it at a multiplied, ridiculous, stupid level, rock bottom, before I really, it's like, oh, wow, right. I'm there again.
So it's also kind of a little bit of like what's the word? Kind of self-reflection of recognizing your tendencies, or when it's like, oh, that I've been here before. It's getting to know yourself. Well, right? I mean, and not being blind to
100%. One of the things that Pastor said to me early on was helping me see what I call the pre-lapse. Right?
Oh, okay. So the pre-lapse would be right before the relapse.
Before the relapse.
Okay.
Can we walk it back to what some people might call a trigger, but even before a trigger, What were you feeling? Is there a pattern in that? One of the things that I saw was really closely tied to my performance and my fear of rejection. And when I feel like I've disappointed someone, or I feel like I've not lived up to my potential, that's when that pain gets kind of turned on. Because a lot of people think that addiction happens because we want to feel good. But for me, the truth is it's because I don't feel good.
Okay.
And so addiction happens as the closest thing I can reach to for a solution for my spiritual emptiness, angst, pain, you know. And so, and it's horrible, because then of course it's this vicious cycle. That's how it becomes a stronghold, where, well, this is the thing that used to fix this and now it doesn't fix it anymore. So what am I going to do now? And it's vicious. But being able to, I had to be in a place of rest in order to even start to notice that about myself, you know, to be able.
Yeah, because I think a lot of times we're blind to the thing that really obvious to other people. Like, you know, this guy over here has blatantly pointed out my blind spots.
Yeah.
We're like a horse with blinders sometimes.
Yes.
I would do that.
and so we
that
need
plays
that
in
our
perfectly
life.
with what Sasha just wrote back with.
Oh,
is
great.
that what she's seen from what you guys are saying is that she needs to depend strongly on other people that are willing to call it and can actually see it. So
Yes.
she thinks that those are the people we should be listening to.
I would stand up on a soapbox for that if I can for a second, because I've been going through kind of a tough time for a couple of months, and I can see God working just in the people he's placed in my life, because I've had these incredible spiritual mentors that are telling me things I don't want to hear. And that's kind of how I know God's placed them in my life. They're not like, oh, that is hard. They're like, okay, well, what are you going to do about it? What is God asking you to do? And so they're asking me those tough questions, calling me to the carpet, because they know my heart. They know my heart isn't, I don't want to stay at rock bottom. You know, I don't want to stay in that place of, you know, turmoil or suffering, whatever. It's like, and the only way to get over it sometimes is facing that stuff. So yes, Sasha, find those people.
Proverbs 21:2. Every way of a man is right in his own eyes.
What does that say it again? I think I need to hear that
Every
again.
way of a woman is right in her own eyes. The second part of the verse, but the Lord weighs the heart. I mean, what the second part clearly says is, but they're blind to themselves. Don't have a clue. Every way in their own eyes is right. And so when you said that, the conversation has already gone here, so I'm just beating a dead horse almost. But when you made the comment, oh, well, you just need to see yourself more clearly, I just about laughed at that point, because, yeah, that's true. If we could all just see ourselves more clearly, but then we have this little problem that we're all blind to ourselves.
Right.
And if you want another one, I'll give you another one real quickly, which is 16:2, that says almost the same thing, except it's an interesting difference. All the ways of a man are pure. 21:2 said right.
Okay.
16:2 says pure. 21:2 says that, but God judges the heart, and I'm going to come back and say motives, you know, I mean,
Right.
whatever you want to think.
Intentions.
In this one it says, but the Lord weighs the spirit. So in 16:2, all the ways of a man are pure in his own eyes, but the Lord weighs the spirit. Let me back up to yesterday. Was interesting. Every once in a while, somebody in the program gets brave and say, tell me my one thing, and, you know, tell me my one thing, obedience, and et cetera. And it's kind of like, oh, so you're asking me to do what I do, you know, and just kind of like take the sword and go chop, chop. But you talked about the prequel. And this particular person was struggling with a lack of discipline and not being able to follow through. Well, what's interesting, if you back that up, before the lack of discipline, there is a depressionary spiral. And so you're like, oh, okay. So the depressionary spiral predates that. And I said, and before that, you know, you've gone through struggles, adoption, et cetera, different kinds of things. So actually your deeper issue is rejection. So your deeper core issue, which is at the front end of that ladder, as soon as I begin to feel awkward with people, as soon as I begin to feel like I don't really fit, then these rejection issues begin to surface. After the rejection issues begin to surface, I distance myself, and I kind of get into a zone where I'm just kind of floundering around, etc. That then triggers the emotional responses, and I start into my depressionary cycle. And then after I hit my depressionary cycle, then I find myself not able to follow through. Well, what people are saying, they're saying to me, well, you're lazy. You just don't follow through. If you would just follow through with anything. If you don't see any of that larger picture, and this is what we do to people, that we don't give them any understanding of that larger picture, and we say, well, you're just lazy.
We diagnose the symptom.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have to get to the root, is what you're saying.
You're just lazy, and if you'd just get your act together and follow through on this stuff, well, you would be fine. Well, there's some truth to that if the person could get his act together and could follow through on things, that actually the thing that person needs to follow through is go all the way back to relationships.
Right.
Yeah.
If they were following through with the right stuff, right way, they might not ever get all the way down here. But so often you go back to what I did in James, and people kind of make it a simple thing of, oh, okay, and they just try to kind of get out the magnifying glass and go really deep right in that one spot, when the reality is, no, there's this whole set of chain reactions going off in you. And so until you have some better idea of those chain reactions, the see it sooner many times feels like it's like in a foreign country. I mean, I'm over in southern Africa, by the time I find the root cause, and I'm like, well, what's my problem? And a lot of times this is the kind of insight that we need to really be able to come alongside and help people.
So you really have to dig down to find what was the first domino that tipped it off to where now we're here. If you just treat this, you're not going to get anywhere. You have to go back to the root.
And knowing
Absolutely.
the problem is only a part of it.
Yeah, it's like the tip of the iceberg.
Right. Then finding a different solution than what I've always gone to, which is redoubling my self-efforts, whatever that is. I'm going to work harder. I'm going to get my stuff together. I'm going to be more disciplined. Instead of turning to God.
Yeah.
Looking to God for healing.
And again, people, turning to God, and I don't mean it, but then that becomes a colloquialism where it's just kind of like, and so then they feel lost out there because, how do I do that?
Yeah.
And that's where I come back to the story that I shared earlier. For me, a key in my life is forcible shutdown, to where whether... And thank God for my wife. Every once in a while I do surrender to my wife, and she kind of enforces a level of shutdown on me to where I don't actually have to get sick. Yeah. Occasionally I have people around me that I'll listen to. I'm pretty strong-willed, pretty stubborn, so not as much or as well as I should. So they're seeing me, they're knowing I'm at a frazzled point, they're starting to speak into my life, and maybe I get there, maybe I don't. But it really comes down to the problem is not addiction. That's just the last piece. The problem isn't whatever other broken, shut down, broken thing. You're going to look at the thing that happened right before that and try to fix that, and chances are you're actually going to get nowhere. The real solution, ultimately, back to what I said, in my case, it's the rest of God. And how do I get from where I am into a place of consistently walking in the rest of God?
So you said something that caught my interest, and a personal question for you, Pastor. If you have a hard time listening to the people that are speaking it into you, and you're the one that is bringing all of this info to people that have never even been able to listen to anybody, how do you, if you're not able to walk that through as well as you think should be done, how do we help other people to do that? And is that just because we're human, or is that too easy of an out for you?
This is a good day to pick on me, right?
Hey, you started it out in the beginning by getting vulnerable. It's awesome.
I opened it up, so it
awesome.
is there. And that's a great question. I'm going to give you a quick answer, which is a one-word answer, and that's trust. And to be honest, one of the things I have going against me is my insight. Because when I'm sitting here and I'm able to sit you down and go boom, 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 and sit you down and go boom, 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 and then I'm kind of like, and you kind of look at me and maybe you throw one thing back at me, I'm kind of like, why would I listen to them? You know, if I'm going to be vulnerable, okay, I'll be vulnerable all the way. Then there's an arrogance that develops out of that it's like, well, they don't know what they're talking about. I mean, look at what I'm able to do with people and how I'm able to dissect them and work with them, so why should I trust? And to be honest, that's the reason I struggle. I mean, the reason I struggle is really being able to step back and say, do I trust my wife here? And should I trust my wife here? Do I trust Heather if she happens to be, or Matthew, or whoever it happens to be? If they're saying something, at some point I've got to override my brain. I've got to override the understanding that I have and be able to step back and go, their wisdom right now is wiser than your wisdom, David. So put up, shut up, and do what they say.
So it's the exact same thing for you as it is for somebody that's day 2 in the program. It's just for different reasons, because you have this level of expertise. And so then yours becomes, well, I already know all of this stuff, so why do I need to listen here? And for someone else, maybe day 1 in the program or stuck in years of addiction, it's, well, I just don't even know anything and I can't trust anybody because in the past I've been hurt. So it's still difficult for both sides of it.
Yeah, and it flip-flops and plays games. Like, I'm thinking about the parallels are striking, actually, when we do try to speak to somebody too early about whatever behavior is coming on, and a natural reaction is to blame. Well, you're just a hypocrite because I know what you do and I know how you are, so I'm not going to listen to you. And which is why it's been so difficult for family members, spouses, close people to speak into the lives of addicts or people who are living in dysfunction, because we know too much about them. It's kind of the same thing. It's like, oh, I know who you are, which is why it's so great to have somebody who can come in from the outside, whether that's a mentor from church or someone from a 12-step program or someone here, you know, who's in a discipleship kind of situation where we can help speak into their lives in a way where they can hopefully hear without that arrogance and that ego popping up, because it's a defense, it's a deflection.
Right. We don't want to own up to our stuff, so how can we deflect or blame?
Right. Yeah. Who are you to tell me?
It's interesting because when you brought up the topic of hitting rock bottom, I didn't realize how much we'd talk about relationships. You know, like, that's really what a lot of this driving force has been, is having people in your life that can show you. It's actually not the laziness, it's the relationship that started this whole process. We are horses with blinders, and sometimes we need that. So, okay, practically speaking, how do you, if you're somebody who's maybe new to faith, you're not a part of a church, or this is like early on in the process and you want that, how, because you hit the nail on the head, it's trust. How do you find somebody that you can trust is giving you godly advice, who's actually offering correction guided by the Holy Spirit, not because of ego? Or, you know, I mean, that's really difficult to find. And I feel very fortunate to have people in my life that I trust 100%, but that's difficult to do, to open up, to be vulnerable, and to know who you can trust. So what is your advice to people that are in that zone, or they just don't really feel like they have anybody to speak that?
It's hard. It's interesting in the program, we see this, that people come in and they'll basically say, I'll trust you, you know, and that's easier now because we have a 15+ year track record and they generally know somebody, or et cetera. The answer is, if you've been burned, you're probably not going to be able to trust anyone. So one of the lines that I make when I'm interviewing people, I talk about accountability is the baby step towards trust. So you're not likely going to be able to walk in and trust someone, so you have to start just at a basic level of, in this area, to this extent, I'm willing to start walking through some basic steps with you. So that's kind of a starting point. A second thing, you have to be careful with that, because obviously there's a lot of people who will be abusive, controlling, who will take advantage of that. The thing that we need to be attentive to is outcomes. So I don't want anybody to come in and blindly trust me. Talk to this person, talk to this person, talk to this person. These are people who I've worked with. Get some feedback from them. Let them tell you what's going on. There has to be some level of openness there in which people are able to take a clean, clear look at accountability, at outcomes. And if there's a track record of outcomes, then you're at least moving yourself in a direction where there's a reasonable expectation of positive outcomes. So I look at that, don't just grab whoever. In fact, if you're in unhealthiness, especially addiction, high-level unhealthiness, the person you're likely to trust is the person who will reinforce where you are. So
explain that.
Let's just start with
a cosigner.
A cosigner, but let's just start with the word normal. What feels right to you is what's normal to you.
Your comfort zone.
It's your comfort zone. And so we respond, as human beings, part of our spiritual response is a right and wrong response. So the toilet paper, over or under, it becomes a right and wrong response.
Yeah, it's over.
Thank you. I'm glad that you're enlightened.
Under.
I'm glad that I didn't realize that you were in sin.
Now you know. Was that the tipping point? Was that the final criteria?
You are absolutely in sin. If the toilet paper goes under, you cannot sit at this table. We have a comment.
Yeah, we actually had Sasha chime in again with a relevant thing to what you're talking about right now. She said sometimes it feels like she has to have it together enough before she can even build relationships where she can be real. And so she thinks to herself that she has to get through this problem or that problem before she can even attempt to get friends or mentors that are there.
Can I just say that's like a total lie? I feel like that's a lie that we believe that keeps us stuck. I'm real passionate about this because we have to be able to recognize, I think we always have this ideal version of ourselves that I'm going to be a person who wakes up at 5 a.m. and has a quiet time and eats a green smoothie for breakfast. That's not an idea. We're never going to be that perfect version of ourselves, and if that's what we're waiting for, then we're forever going to be stunted. Sorry, you're the teacher. Go ahead.
So
I was just going to say 5
a.m.
a.m. is not an ideal version of self, but that's okay.
So what we had Plain Jane asking, so what do we do in the meantime if we're not in that place yet, but we do need the godly people to trust and challenge us?
So what's been very helpful for me, because I came into a recovery program in a town where I know no one, didn't have a church, didn't have a base, had no family here, nothing. What was really helpful for me is the pastor of a church that I visited actually sent a woman to just come pick me up. I was just willing to have a ride to church on Sundays with her. And so 4 or 5 times, as I started to just spend time with her in this 5-minute drive to church, I started to see her fruits. You were talking about outcomes. I started to see her fruits. I started to hear her talk about her children and her relationship with her husband. And I met them there at church. And she began to reach out to me to get vulnerable about her own journey with God. And so when I recognized, you're not the 5 a.m. green smoothie lady. You are a real human being, just like I am, who owns her own faults, owns her own shortcomings, and still places herself before God and is willing to reach out and be of service to somebody else. I kind of want to be like that. Yeah. Maybe I don't want to be perfect.
Right.
Maybe I want to be real.
It wasn't her perfection that drew you to her. It was actually her honesty and vulnerability. Yeah. And I think that's
her commitment and integrity.
Yeah.
And just showing up every Sunday. She didn't know me, but she and her husband take opposite cars just so she can come pick me up. You know, that type of sacrifice was important for me. But I also think that that's where hitting rock bottom is so crucial, because I did have to come to the end of myself, where I was like, I have to do something different. I cannot continue to live in my bubble, taking my own advice all the time. I've got to. God, please help me be willing to do something different than I've ever done.
But doesn't Pastor say frequently, too, that there is no rock bottom because you can always dig it further?
Well,
I have long since having done this ministry and heard the proud affirmations of people who've come in. I've hit my bottom. I've learned my lesson. I'll never go there again. They'll hit their bottom again.
Yeah, thank God he's gracious, and he gives us opportunity after opportunity to stumble, to fall, to scrape our knees, to hit our bottom over and go, oh yeah, God, I forgot. You're the boss of me. Please come into my life. Please show me something new. You know, he gives me these opportunity after opportunity to surrender in my finances, my relationships, my addictions, my whatever shortcomings.
If I'm to go back to basics, I believe one of the most important things, and again, I don't like the word things, but I don't have a better word right now, for you to receive is worth. So you were going back to, and you were saying, okay, who do you find? How do you trust, etc. The most important thing is probably not somebody who has it together in an area that you need. It's somebody who can look at you, see you, and love you. Because if that worth inside of you, that self-worth, that acceptance of yourself as a human being, if that peace begins to wake up, there's an incredible strength that comes out of that. So as you said, thank God that you're able to love you through the rock bottoms. I think that's been one of the most powerful things. Because of the inside, I've been able to translate that to, oh, I see who you are. I see what you're going through. I see all of the things that you're fighting. Yeah, I see the next relapse coming. Oh, yeah, okay, we had that relapse. Okay, are we ready to listen now? When you're able to put all those things together and you're still able to love someone despite the ugliness, etc., if you can ever find that person, that person is absolute gold, because the biggest thing that will change you is not getting better in your problem area. We all have strengths and weaknesses that we'll live with till the day we die. But it's when you start drinking in the love of God, the acceptance of God, and it changes that insecurity, anxiety piece on the inside. When that starts changing, that's when all of a sudden you find yourself waking up able to overcome where I couldn't overcome before.
So I want to circle back to before Sasha's other question, which thanks for hanging out with us. This is fun to take comments. But you were talking about people that I think are in our comfort zone. That's where we naturally want to go for trusting them, and but that's not necessarily where we need to go. Is that where you were kind of headed with that?
Oh, that's absolutely
it. It kind of got cut off, and I wanted to reiterate the importance of that. I mean, there are times I leave your house mad. Like,
come on.
Yes.
Me?
I mean,
I would make you mad.
From a place of openness, I've been getting counseling with David. He's my father-in-law, for those of you who don't know. Pretty intensely for the last 2 months, probably, just over a certain issue. And there are times that I leave just pissed at you. But I know you're right. I mean, I'm mad because I don't want you to be right, or I want to be justified in my anger or my hurt, and you don't sit with, you're terrible at that. You're not like, oh, let's talk more about that. You're like, okay, well, that's real, and that's where you're at. So what are you going to do now? What are you going to do about it? And that sucks sometimes. That's not what you want.
Just for the record, there are people who aren't quite so fiery and fighters that I'm a little softer with.
Okay.
Just for the record, I do occasionally have a soft side. I just don't happen to think you need it.
Yeah, not with me. And he's right. That's not what I need. But that's my point, is that may be what I want from you, is this like, oh, I'm sorry. That's horrible. And what I get is, okay, well, this is the reality of your situation. What are you going to do about it? What's God calling you to? And that's not always fun. That's not always comfortable, but that's exactly what I need, is that iron sharpening iron, that refining of that friendship, that relationship that we have, where I can take your godly influence and the thing, because I know you're speaking, I know it's empowered by the Holy Spirit. I know that, because even when I'm mad, I know you're right, and that's where it's difficult to sometimes find that person who you can trust, that even when they tick you off, they're saying the right thing and you know it. it's hard. So I just kind of wanted to circle back to say, if you're searching for those people and it's somebody that always makes you feel really good, that may not be the voice really that you need. It may be what you want, but it may not be what you need.
Not a good one. And we do really, if I'm go back to addiction for just a moment, that's part of why so many people are still addicts. They have, quote unquote, trusted people in the past. Well, who have you trusted? I mean, the addict next door. I mean, they tend to trust the people who they feel comfortable with. Well, if they're in an addict zone, the people they're going to feel comfortable with are going to be in an addict zone, and the odds of them getting better are like slim to none. So you almost always, in terms of trust, you almost always have to start off with accountability. And what I talk about, you see, think inside, feel inside of where you are. So if I'm working with you and if I can get you to just take step A, once you take step A, you're thinking, feeling, and seeing from inside of a different location. What I couldn't talk to you about over here before, now that you've taken this step and you're in a different location, now I can talk to you and I might have a chance with you. But that's not what we do. What we do is, back to the Garden of Eden, we'll all listen and all decide. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting, Rehoboam, when he comes along, the son of Solomon, when he comes along, his dad lived in wealth that was like, ridiculous. So when he comes along, the elders looked around and they said, you need to lighten up on the people. The people came and said, hey, will you lighten up on it? And the elders who saw that and had kind of predated Solomon and lived through his reign, they're like, yeah, this is right. Well, guess what? The young people, right. Solomon's age, who had lived in that age of wealth and had been shaped there, they're like, no. You handle them rough. If you handle them rough, you'll just smash them. Well, guess what? The kingdom split at that point. Rehoboam, Solomon's son, responded according to what was normal to him. He listened to the counselors that felt within his zone, and it totally backfired and it totally blew up. So much of the time, if you've got an unhealthy area, chances are the counsel that you need to listen to will be, first of all, uncomfortable, but second of all, it probably is going to need to be preceded by some action steps, because you're probably not going to understand until you take some basic action steps. After those action steps, then you might be able to receive the counsel. You'll still hate it. You'll still be mad, punch them out, whatever. You can add whatever else you want to add in there. But this is what it looks like in order to come out of that rock bottom and get better.
And I just wanted to go back. We had a busy chat today, and so I did miss that Charlotte had brought up when we'd been talking about rest. And I just thought it was important to go into. She said that sometimes rest isn't just about being alone or going and not doing something. Sometimes it can be being forced into something different, and that you can find rest in that. And then the last question that we have is from Plain Jane asking, have you noticed cues or themes in the Bible of how God brings us out of our rock bottom so those without a healthy support system can notice his moving? Are there any themes or cues out of the Bible for how God brings us out of our rock bottom so that we can start to notice his moving?
I'm going to give kind of a shameless plug to one of your books.
Sure.
Which is Releasing God's Life. This is an answer to Plain Jane's question. But as I was looking into this idea of bottom, I was looking through some of your literature, and you have a whole chapter in here called Why Brokenness. And it talks about a Christianity that I think we don't hear a lot about, which is the one that I believe Christ calls us to. In Matthew 5:3, he says, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven." And he also says in Luke, when he's standing before the synagogue and he reads from the scrolls, the Spirit of the Lord is upon me, and he gives what I like in this book you call his mission statement, which is just so beautiful. I loved thinking about it in that way, that he sent me, Christ, to heal the brokenhearted, to proclaim liberty to the captives. Those are the ones who are being held by these strongholds, recovery of sight to the blind, to set at liberty those who are oppressed, to proclaim the acceptable year of the Lord. So for me, like seeing over and over again, getting to know the character of Christ, was my first heart opening into the gospel, into a relationship with Christ, going, he really loves people just like me.
Yeah.
He doesn't ask me to be perfect before I come before him, like I think I have to be, like Sasha was saying in her. This is why he's here, is to love us when we're at rock bottom. So I would definitely start with the Gospels, really, and just seeing how he reaches out to the people the lepers, who some of us don't even realize what that meant to be a leper in Israel. That means that you are a total outcast. You have done something so atrocious that God has afflicted you with this horrible thing. And to just see how Christ just reaches out and loves us through all of that.
Yeah.
When you were reading that, I was reminded of Isaiah 42:3, where it says, and again, this is a description of Christ, it says, a bruised reed he will not break, and as smoking flax he will not quench. He will bring forth justice for truth. And I love that picture when we're in Christ. When we're walking in that place of fullness, it doesn't matter if there's brokenness. It doesn't matter if that reed it's bruised and man, there's no hope for it. No, he won't go in and break that, and he'll come alongside. And so yes, you have all that. I actually want to go back to rest and just make a quick comment too. Rest we often think as the absence of work. But when you look at Hebrews 3 and you look at Hebrews 4, rest wasn't, they're actually comparing the wilderness to the promised land. And if I had my understanding, rest was when we're in the wilderness. No, rest is when they come into the promised land. So biblical rest isn't a lack of activity. Biblical rest is me coming into the promised land with God right there with me, walking me through the battles with giants, etc., and I'm fully in Christ. I'm in a place of faith. I'm resting in Christ. I'm partnering with God. I'm doing my part, but the greater part is God. The greater strength is God. When I learn to walk in God's strength, that's when the rest begins to come alongside. And I would actually take that back to hitting bottom. Virtually everybody's hitting bottom comes out of them trying to do their gift of God in their own strength. Almost basically 100%. When I sit down and I work with someone, when I'm able to identify what the gift of God and the calling of God is in their life, I back that up one step and I say, oh, okay, you were therefore then trying to fulfill the call God had on your own life in your own strength. When you are doing that apart from God, you're burning your natural energy to the point where you hit this incredibly broken, burnout state. So it's all of this is tied together when you all pull it back together to where, oh, wow. And that's part of what makes me successful working with people. I don't start with their depression. I don't start with their brokenness. I don't start with their sickness. The first place I start to have understanding is I try to get a vision of, oh, this is who God created you to be. Well, because this is who God created you to be, no wonder you were going off in human effort like a wild man in this area because you were trying to measure up. You're just trying to be who God created you to be. Duh. Of course you're there. All right, let's take a deep breath. We can figure this out. We can work it from here. And when you can instill that vision and that faith and then start inviting God into that, which is the rest of God, where the empowerment of God is there, it's just an incredible, powerful recipe. But I'll take you back. Tuesday morning, I woke up. Spirit of God was all over me. I was communing. My brain started doing what? Faster, 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 faster. I mean, I was ready to write 2 new books. Just out of that few moments with God. And within moments, what happened? The same cycle starts all over again, where I lose communion with God. I lose the rest of God, and I begin to jump back into performance. And we, as fallen creatures, we are so prone to jump back into that place of trying to prove ourselves apart from God. And what I find in addiction, what I find in brokenness, you can't do it apart from God. You can't do it apart from God. How do we get you back into a place of partnership?
Well, it's been an amazing discussion. I think, are we out of time?
Well, there's not a strict time limit, but
it felt like we were out of time.
We're past the 45 minutes, which is kind of our targeted time. In fact, we're 5 minutes past the time. So yes, we are absolutely out of time.
What I really felt like is you just did such a perfect summation of everything that we talked about. It sounded like a good spot.
And I think it is time for it to wrap it up. Just say to you, hey, thank you for joining us. Especially thank you for the listeners today who jumped in. It was great to have that kind of discussion today, that kind of interaction. You really make this work. Otherwise, why not? We might as well just do videos, and produce them, put them out there. So that's the purpose of the live stream. Pass it on that it's happening to other people. We'd like to grow this audience and touch more people, touch more lives. Thank you for joining us. Subscribe, like it, pass it on. And we hope to see you next time when we're here with Heart Change You live stream. We'll see you on Tuesday.
And next Tuesday for the programming, since we had it switched up, is that going to be just you again, or is that going to be another group?
We'll stay with the group format on Tuesday.
Okay. And also, thank you, Jackie, for being here.
Yes.
That was awesome having a different point of view.
It was so great to have a guest.
Appreciated your contribution.
Yeah,
Thank you.
It was
Thank you
awesome.
for having me. It was fun.
I knew that you could, challenge me.
Oh,
so
man.
Yeah,
thanks.
We appreciate that.
You brought the fire and the
that.
laughs.
Thanks for joining us.